I've done a comparison of the 6 major historical tarot decks. Today, I'd like to add a quick block-by-block comparison of the trumps in these decks because they're ordered remarkably differently. The 6 decks are the Bolognese, the Florentine and the Sicilian decks at the top, and then decks from Ferrara, Pavia and Marseille. This shall be the top to bottom order of the decks on each example screen. A mixed Visconti deck from Milan, as well as the Tarot de Marseille from Paris, shall serve as substitutes for the Ferraris and Pavian packs. The lowest tarot trumps are always comprised of social ranks, the lowest of the low, as well as the highest of the high. The court cards within the suits that I'll not cover today can be construed as in-betweeners then. These are the ranks. On the very left we have the Fool, who's not an actual trump, often depicted as a wretch outside of society, and the Player, earning his meagre revenue as a fair magician. Above those, there's a court of up to 4 cards. These are most often an Empress and an Emperor, as well as a Popus and a Pope. The tarot also introduced gender equality to the suits by adding queens that are absent from other original Italian card decks. Sicilian tarot adds an actual wretch, Miseria, between the 2 lowest social ranks, and it also introduced the virtue constancy that is missing from all other tarot decks. The court is often altered. In Bologna, the 4 court positions are simply 4 North African Moors, equal in rank. In Florence, the court has been abridged to only 3 cards, ultimately to keep Death, a card we haven't encountered yet, at number 13. The 3 court cards are all emperor-like figures in Florence, albeit collectively called popes. In Sicily, the court cards are but 2, with the aforementioned constancy effectively acting as a 3rd. Otherwise, the court is comprised of an empress, an emperor and a pope. The 4th card, the Popus, has an unstable position, attested anywhere between the other 3. Only later his position became fixed just below the empress. The second block contains 2 allegories, Love and the Chariot, interspersed with at least 1, if not 3, of the 4 cardinal virtues, Temperance, Justice and Fortitude. Prudence, the 4th, is conspicuously missing. But Constancy, or Sicilian acquaintance, can be construed as either a part of the court, as we got to know her, or indeed as the first virtue, again, only present in Sicily. The block of all 3 tarot virtues is the most mobile across all the decks, sitting below Love in Sicily, between the 2 allegories in Florence, and after the Chariot in Bologna. The 3 other decks all have in common that the block of 3 virtues is completely dissolved. They're scattered across the deck. In Ferrara and other northern cities, Temperance precedes the 2 allegories. In Pavia, Justice sits between Love and the Chariot, and in Marseille, its spot is right after the Chariot. All 3 tarot virtues are extremely mobile, but the sword in the scales of Justice might just be the most mobile of them all. Between Temperance and Fortitude in Bologna, above Temperance and Fortitude in Florence and Sicily, as well as in the aforementioned spots in Pavia and Marseille. The virtues are not the only cards displaying mobility. The Chariot drives around as well. It precedes Love in some versions of the Ferrari sequence, and is in turn preceded by the normally higher allegory of the Wheel of Fortune in Florence. I've offered a potential rationale in an earlier video. The next block is centered around the 4 allegories of the Wheel of Fortune, Old Age / the Hunchback / the Hermit, the Hangman, and Death. Death is in fact perhaps the most central and iconic of all tarot cards, quite consistently numbered 13. It appears to me that this number was of crucial significance to the composition of historical tarot decks, which is also why some decks have shorter courts, as we already saw. Some renumber the cards, and some place one of the virtues above Death. Because if the first trump bore the number 1, the court were fully staffed with 4 ranks, and all 3 virtues sat below Death, Death would have to be numbered 14, and we can't have that, now can we? We already saw that the Chariot sits above the Wheel of Fortune in Florence. Back to the mobility of the virtues. Fortitude precedes the entire block in Ferrara and Pavia, whereas Temperance follows the entire block in Pavia and Marseille. Besides, Fortitude and Old Age have apparently switched places between Pavia and Marseille. These swaps ultimately led to a completely regular disposition of the virtues in Marseille, where each of them follows a block of 2 allegories. Justice follows Love and the Chariot, as we saw. Fortitude follows Old Age, i.e. the Hermit and the Wheel of Fortune, whereas Temperance follows the Hangman and Death. It's Time, i.e. Old Age, that seemingly floats around the decks, below the Wheel of Fortune in Marseille, and above the Hangman, having effectively switched places with him in Sicily, not unlike the Chariot that drove around the decks, as we saw. The final blocks transcend the earthly realm. We encounter the Devil and his house, i.e. the crumbling tower, the Angel of Judgment and his house, i.e. an idealized world, as well as 3 heavenly lights, the star, the moon, and the sun, always sandwiched between the 2 allegorical pairs. The arrangement of these highest cards offers fewer surprises than in the earlier groups, but the motifs, the colouring, and the function of these cards during play can differ quite astonishingly. In Sicily, say, the Devil has become a ship, the tower is not crumbling, the 3 lights display curious mythological scenes, whereas the world and the judging angel have become the world bearer Atlas and judging Jupiter. Justice, our old friend, pairs up with the Angel of Judgment Day in Ferrara, bidding farewell to its more lowly sisters Temperance and Fortitude, and also clandestinely keeping Death at number 13. Finally, the world trumps everything in the three decks where the virtues are scattered, whereas it's only the second highest trump in the typically Italian decks, followed by the invincible angel there, called the Trumpets in Florence, i.e. the Trumpets of Judgment Day. Before I conclude, it's worthwhile having a last look at the relative positions of the three virtues to each other across the decks. We duly notice their remarkable mobility. It might well be that the Bolognese arrangement on top, Temperance, Justice, Fortitude, was the original one, whilst Justice began towering above the others fairly soon and switched places with Temperance later. Notice, by the way, the different attributes of Fortitude. A column in the three typically Italian decks versus a lion in the quote-unquote exported decks. A fourth virtue, Constancy, was notoriously added in Sicily, whilst an entire block of 20 new cards was added in Florence. We did not touch upon that topic today. I've made a separate video pertinent to that. But the noteworthy fact is that 4 of these 20 new cards are additional virtues. The Protrudent Prudence, missing from all the other decks, as well as the 3 ecclesiastical virtues, Hope, Faith, and Charity. Now that was that. Cheers for listening in.